It's been just 1 week since Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he would resign and kicked off a Liberal leadership race. And this is the current list of candidates committed to or considering or talked about as vying for the top job. Chandra Arya, Jaime Batiste, and Frank Baylis have all said they're running, depending on a few things. Sources say Mark Carney will announce his bid this week, while the others are still considering putting their names forward. Meanwhile, two more cabinet ministers say they will not be running. One is Transport Minister Anita Anand, who also says she will not be running for re-election in the upcoming election. The other is Labour Minister Stephen McKinnon, who said in a statement, "The leadership race requires diverse experience and pragmatic voices, both in French and in English. I believe that I could be such a voice. Unfortunately, the time available does not allow me to mount the kind of campaign that I would want to run." We're going to bring in the power panel to talk about all of this. Rob Russo is the former CBC Parliamentary Bureau Chief, now the Canada correspondent for The Economist. Lisa Raitt is a former Conservative cabinet minister. Brad Levine is a former national campaign director for the NDP. And here with me in the studio, Vandana Cotter is a former advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Okay, before we dive into it, two more bits of news that we have to share with you. We can tell you that Chrystia Freeland will launch this week. She will launch her leadership bid, we're told, before Donald Trump is inaugurated on the 20th of January, so sometime between now and that particular day. And this is not leadership related, we're told, but it's interesting because let me just show you this tweet. The Daily Show, big show in the U.S. Jon Stewart will be back behind the Daily Show anchor desk tonight with the show's regular Monday night host set to interview Canadian economist Mark Carney. Well, isn't that interesting? Canadian economist, let's go to the correspondent for The Economist. Rob Russo, what do you make of where things are right now with the leadership race? With it looks like Carney's getting in for sure, Freeland's getting in for sure, Christy Clark, despite everything on Friday, getting in, and then those would be maybe and Karina Gould. We might hear something from her this week. What do you think of where we are?
Well, we're at a point where we are going to have, I think, a very good debate about what renewal looks like in the Liberal Party. I think leadership changes are always about renewal. They're trying to get new members in. The Liberal Party is not going to be able to get a lot of new members in. Try to get some new money in. They'll get some in terms of a great big ticket price of $350,000 to get into the leadership race, but not a lot of new money. But are we going to get a renewal of ideas? And we're going to have a couple of cabinet ministers, if things hold the form, who are going to try and represent renewal while having served in Justin Trudeau's cabinet, and a couple of people from the outside. And that's going to make for a very, very interesting debate. And one hopes, I think, a real debate about what represents renewal from the center left in the country. Right. So smaller race. The other people who are signaling, like Mr. McKinnon, like others, like Mr. Batiste, we have to remember, and to a certain extent, Ms. Gould as well, these are people who are going to have trouble holding on to their seats. So when you signal that you're going to jump into the race and then you reconsider, what you've done is you've raised your profile for a little while and you hope that that helps your reelection. And I think that there's some of that going on as well.
I would normally agree. Karina Gould, I don't know, Rob. There's something going on there. People are lining up. She's had some interesting meetings. There seems like there's some cash. And I think they're going to pitch her as, I'll stick around even if we lose. Will the others do that?
Yeah,
so
she's young.
The generational play, right? Yeah.
Yeah, young, smart, Harvard educated, but very tough in her riding in Burlington.
Yeah, no question. Vandana, we're going to hear from François-Philippe Champagne tomorrow. We're told he's going to give his answer. Now, in an election that's going to be about affordability and reconnecting with ordinary Canadians, he's going to give his answer at a business elite function in Toronto. That doesn't sound like a launch. Yeah. That sounds like I'm staying out of this race to do my job for the good of the country, because it seems to me if you wanted to launch, you'd have your crowd behind you and on your own terms. But it looks like no prominent Quebecer is going to get into this race at this point. Is that your view of it?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing so far. And I think, that can be a number of reasons. I would say, for Minister Jolie, I understand she's a foreign affairs minister during a difficult time. I think the same thing with Minister Champagne. He probably wants to focus on the economy, but also perhaps, for some of them, maybe looking after making some calls and figuring out, thinking that maybe this is not the best time for me, which is normal. It is interesting to not have a prominent voice from Quebec. So I think the leaders, it's going to be really important of who is bilingual, but also who can speak speak to those areas. I'm not talking about Montreal. You know, if you think of every riding, it's every riding's 100 points. Who can get into the regions? Who can get into a legion? Who can go into a church basement or wherever just to talk? And I think I can speak French in a calm and very everyday way. So that's going to be really important.
So, Lisa, when you look at it from outside the Liberal Party of Canada, I mean, does this look like Carney versus Freeland down the stretch run? Is that how it's shaping up, given that it doesn't, unless Karina Gould gets in, it looks like no member of the current cabinet is going to run, which is kind of surprising, quite frankly, but a former minister, obviously, in Chrystia Freeland. What are your thoughts? Chrystia Clark, of course, looks like she's getting in, but I don't know if that launch on Friday, the soft launch on Friday, I don't know if that helped her. What are your thoughts?
So you're telling me that Champagne's not popping the cork tomorrow?
Probably. Well, he might be, because he might be celebrating being able to sit this one out. Who knows, right?
True. He's going to be at the Canadian Club in Toronto.
Yeah.
It's been in the books for a long period of time, and I guess he's going to say some things that presumably he wasn't allowed to say in the past. So that will be, I think, of great interest. Look, here's what I find really interesting. When I talk to anybody on Bay Street or anyone in Toronto or any of the clients that I get to talk to, it's never the mentality of, oh, thank goodness Mark Carney is running. The issue is, why would Mark Carney want this job? That's the angle that people are coming at it. And I find that to be very interesting, because to me, that means they've already kind of set aside the notion of voting for the Liberals, even if it is Mark Carney. What they're trying to figure out is, why would he want to have this kind of job? And maybe tonight on The Late Show, that's exactly what he's going to talk about, why he wants to be Prime Minister of Canada. But all that being said, I'm very concerned that there's not a Quebec candidate. I think there does need to be a Quebec candidate in there. It has to have that kind of balance, and I think it's good for everybody, because it's not just about speaking French, it's about understanding the nuance. And both Carney and Freeland are from the West, essentially transplanted into Toronto and Ottawa. And that may not be the best for the Liberal Party. But who am I to say? I mean, and the last part, I would just say, David, that my experience is running for leadership does not necessarily mean you're going to win your next election, because I didn't.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't want to be picking at old wounds. You know, Brad, first of all, it's The Daily Show, not The Late Show. The Late Show is the Colbert thing that Trudeau was on. This is The Daily Show, which Mr. Carney's going to be on. Again, told not leadership related, but I mean, who the hell knows what will happen on that. Brad, what are your thoughts on where the race is and isn't shaping up a week after the Prime Minister dropped his bombshell?
Well, there's two things we've learned since last Monday that I think will color what we're going to be seeing. One is the Liberal Party's rules and the $350,000 entry fee. That's significant, and that is going to, I think, really separate those who can command a tremendous amount of the apparatus, the Liberal Party apparatus, as it currently sits now, in terms of raising that money, which forces, well-meaning and well-intentioned members of Parliament who want to run. I don't think they're going to make that grade. Second one is the amount of time they have. And you heard that in Steve McKinnon's thing. It's like, listen, there's not enough time here to build the kind of coalition that you need to make a serious run for leader. That leaves, front runners like Carney and Freeland. And I would say, if we had this conversation on Friday, I would have added Chrystia Clark. I think there's 2.5 in the front runners. What happened on Saturday on the House, I think, and from what I'm hearing from those that I know within the Liberal Party, that did not go over very, very well. It's an issue of trust, not an issue of supporting Mr. Jean Charest in the last Conservative leadership. Had she just come out cleanly, Chrystia Clark come out cleanly and said, I joined the party, I wanted to support a centrist candidate, no problem there. Or the Liberal Party left me, I went with Charest. But she didn't. She said she never joined it, and then there was evidence provided that she actually did join it. There's going to be a challenge with trust. So stumbling out of the gate's not good. That leaves Freeland and Carney, and you've got basically an outsider coming in who's done, and Mark Carney's done a lot of work over the last little while in terms of building caucus support, and that's important, not only because you need that, but also those MPs going locally, supporting Carney on the local level, getting those local apparatuses to support him. And then you've got Freeland. So she's going to have to pivot and separate, and I think do more than just say, I quit him when he wanted to demote me and give me the issue of Canada-U.S. relations and still be Deputy Prime Minister.
Right.
She was in cabinet every single day when the bad decisions that so many Canadians don't like anymore were there. So the rules are forcing the front runners, just a small amount of front runners, and those front runners both, I think, have benefits as well as negatives going into the opening days, which we're going to see within the coming days.
So, Rob, just your assessment on Christy Clark. Like, she did when Catherine Cullen told me, "Hey, I've got an interview with Christy Clark today, and we'll come on your show if there's news." I didn't expect this, right? She now says she misspoke. But, she's on the record as saying she joined the Conservative Party, that she got her ballot in the mail, and that she voted for Jean Charest. To never join the party, never got my ballot, never voted. I don't know which of these are the misspeak. But, Jean Charest left the Federal Conservative Party to be the Quebec Liberal Premier because that was in the national interest of the country, and she could have done an explanation in similar framing when talking about what she did in her attempt to stop Pierre Poilievre, which is the way she's saying it now. But is this an inside baseball thing, or she's got to convince Liberals before she convinces Canadians, and this doesn't seem like a good entry?
Anybody who knows British Columbia politics knows that labels mean very, very little there. A Liberal is a Conservative is a Liberal. That being said, I would think that one of the qualifications for a national federal leadership of any particular political party would require you to have some semblance of memory of which party you belong to at any given time. And that, I think it was the way she kind of deliberated from certainty that she wasn't a conservative to, oh my God, I might have been a conservative. Now what am I going to do? That put her in a bad light. I want to go back to Mr. Carney for a second.
Sure.
Because I think Lisa asked a very, very important question. Why would he want to do it? And I interviewed him about a year ago for the magazine, and I asked him that very question. And I think I can sum up his answer by saying, like this was a guy who was right there during the Great Recession and had a huge impact on how we came out of it, right there during Brexit, and had an impact on how the UK prepared for it. I think he misses the juice. His answer was, in effect, if you want to do something about public policy and you care about public policy, politics is a pretty good vehicle to get it at. And I think that's part of it. He likes having a big impact on big events.
Yeah, and one other thing to mention on the Christy Clark thing, daring Jenny Byrne and the Conservative Party to provide the proof was probably also not a wise move because they did that with screenshots. I want to ask you quickly about Anita Anand. Not only not running for leader, announcing she's not running again. It's been suggested to me by people in your party over the weekend that this could be the first of quite a few people who make that decision because they were people who ran for Justin Trudeau, were committed to staying under Justin Trudeau, and now they don't know. Could be a dozen, could be dozens of MPs. I mean, I don't know if it's that severe, but what's your sense on whether this is the first of what could be a lot of people deciding not going to run?
I wouldn't say it's a lot. I would probably not say it's dozens. I think a lot of people will see how the leadership plays out. Now, different things like, you ran for the leader, you probably had a similar vision to what he had in 2015. You joined his team, and it's been a long time, not just for the PM, but for a lot of MPs. It is a taxing job now. It is now a 24-hour job. When I started my career in politics, I was still faxing documents, and there wasn't a Twitter. Now you have to respond to these things. So I think that has changed the game a bit. So I understand why people would want to change and think of different ways to serve the public. I also think, again, it's your leader. Like, I worked in the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's, in his office. I worked with him under leader. I don't know what another leader would be like. I don't know what his views would be like or what their values would be like, and if they're aligned to mine. So it is possible some people might take this moment to be like, you know what, it's time for a change. I don't think there's going to be a huge exit. I think some people will see what the leadership and who the leader is, and perhaps depending on who that is, whether they feel good with them or not, they might choose to go.
Okay, fair point. Okay, because that is a big inflection moment. We've got another one coming because it's 1 week from the Prime Minister saying he's going to resign, and we're 1 week until Donald Trump's inauguration. Canada's First Ministers, they're set to meet on Wednesday to deal with this. They'll be here in Ottawa on Wednesday to discuss the federal response to the looming tariff threat from the U.S. President-elect. Among the options on the table is restricting energy exports, something Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she won't stand for.
They will have a national unity crisis on their hands at the same time as having a crisis with our U.S. trade partners. We just won't stand for that. And I don't think Ontarians in Quebec should stand for that as well. They shouldn't be standing by and listening while a federal minister talks about cutting off their energy supply. That's just not on. That makes no sense.
Well, today, Ontario Premier Doug Ford didn't rule out on restricting his energy exports, electricity, saying everything should be on the table.
We have to use all the tools possible when our country's under attack. economically. When our country, our province is under attack economically, you just don't roll over. And let's see if the feds have a strong plan. I know we have a list that we're going to be running through with the federal government, but when we get there Wednesday, we'll expect a list, and we need them to be 100% ready.
So what can the federal government present on Wednesday that satisfies Team Canada, and how does it go about working with the incoming U.S. administration? Lisa, let's start there. Danielle Smith, very worried about the idea of some sort of an energy embargo coming out of the country based on what Melanie Joly said over the weekend of all options are on the table. Scott Moe on earlier saying he's been reassured by the federal government that's not what they're willing to do. It's just there's certain placeholder language you have to just adopt until you are ready to show your cards. But it shows the challenges of responding to this, but calibrating it to not affect national unity and not compound the damage whatever Trump does might do on Canadians and the Canadian economy.
Right. And with the last part of it being what will really hurt. I mean, the reality is that the United States has the wherewithal to withstand any kind of retaliatory measures that we may take, because their economy is humongous and they have a lot more ability, more firepower. They have a lot more, dry powder, all the kind of terminology that we used to say, which we don't possess anymore in this country. So getting into that kind of back and forth, I think could be really problematic. You don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face, that's for sure. And on the other side of it too, I mean, not only do you want to think about it from the point of view of what are we going to do vis-a-vis the United States, this government should be thinking about what are we going to do going into the future to make sure we're pivoting, we're diversifying, we're thinking of other places where we're going to end up sending our resources to. Do we have a massive national discussion on how to fast track projects so that we're talking about 18 months as opposed to 6 years to get things going, because we're facing a crisis and Mr. Trump is just coming in. It's not like it's the end of his term, it's the beginning of his 4 years. So this is going to be continuous. But I think the big thing that I took out of Danielle Smith's visit to Mar-a-Lago is her saying that she doesn't believe that Trump is going to back away, that it's going to be 25% and it's going to be on everything. So Canadians, buckle up. We have to be prepared for what's about to happen.
Well, Brad, Kevin O'Leary was also at that meeting in Mar-a-Lago, and there was a lot of Marshall McLuhan talk about signal and noise earlier. He seems to think this is a starting point for an economic union conversation. I don't know if that's where it goes, but you have the different interpretations. You have the threat from Donald Trump standing there, not being withdrawn, and now this meeting on Wednesday. Where do you think the First Ministers need to be at the end of that meeting?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't know Mr. O'Leary in what capacity he's standing next to the President-elect and the Premier of Alberta. That's curious. To say nothing of his, selection
looking like Mr. Clean
of outfit, but he certainly has no public or formal role to play in anything he says as an individual, and doesn't represent anybody but himself. That's first and foremost. The thing to Lisa's point, and that's exactly what I took from Premier Smith's comments. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of for how long. And then the question becomes for the First Ministers. And we've said this in the previous Monday panels, in the absence of a strong, and I know they're meeting on Wednesday, in the absence of a strong federal presence, we have nobody who's speaking for Canada, and in place of that vacuum, which currently there is, you are now having multiple voices who are representing provincial governments, who are now all saying slightly different things. Leverage to Trump based on the fact that we cannot get our own house in order here, and I put it squarely on Trudeau and the federal government. The fact that he's waited too long, chose to actually have a lame duck period while Trump is going to be imposing these tariffs for multiple weeks before we have a replacement Liberal leader, and then that person's first day on the job is going to have to be playing catch-up with all this. This is all self-imposed by the Liberal Party of Canada on the people of Canada, and it's an absolute outrage, and it's frustrating to watch this thing. So now you've got Premier Eby saying maybe we should look at critical minerals coming out of British Columbia for things like Elon Musk's batteries. And then you've got, Premier Ford, who you played a clip of. Maybe he's saying, maybe we hold back on their liquor and their orange juice. Maybe we choke their supply of electricity to the Northeast. And then you've got Moe and Smith in the prairie provinces saying, don't do anything that will upset our current tenuous market play in the United States. So if you take a look at from the White House's perspective, we do not have our act together. We show weakness when we don't have a common front, when we don't have. So to the First Ministers on Wednesday is to come out of there with a coherent and united front, so that we can actually have some leverage over not whether or not these tariffs come in, according to what Premier Smith heard this weekend, but to limit the duration by which these tariffs hurt Canadian working men and women.
So on Brad's point that this is kind of a mess of the Liberal government's own making, I mean, there's a lot of people saying that Justin Trudeau waited way too long to come to a decision that should have been evident after Toronto-St. Paul at minimum. Where does this, in your view, leave the government and the country in its ability to respond to this? Because its focus is split now in the leadership, and it's running out of time because there's going to be an election soon.
I don't think the government's focused on leadership. I think the party's focused on leadership. The government is functioning. I mean, there's no legislation right now. The House isn't sitting, it's prorogued. But government on a day-to-day is functioning. There are ministers out there. They're doing their job. So you can respond to the border. You can respond to the U.S. You know, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, was in the U.S., you know, selling our message. And I would say what needs to happen is everyone needs to come together. Canadian unity is more important than ever. And I agree that I hope after Wednesday there is a united voice. I think it's great that premiers have different ideas of what they should be doing. I hope they come out with like one united plan that everyone can understand. Now, I think what happened earlier was probably just, it was a distraction to what was happening. I don't think the Prime Minister or the work being done on the border was being distracted by it, but obviously the news cycle and what the Canadians see is, what are we talking about? Now the answer is answered. You know, the PM isn't running again. He is the Prime Minister until there's a new leader. And you have Dominic LeBlanc staying in place. You have Melanie Joly staying in place. They're all focused on the border and in the U.S. They will continue to go into the U.S. and make the Canadian case and fight for the country. And I think we need more, our political leaders need to take that same stand and show they're fighting it. I don't disagree with Lisa also that in order to, we should not be thinking of just right now with the tariffs, but also what is the future hold and how we diversify so that we can, you know, immune ourselves in the future.
Right. And so, Rob,
David,
go ahead.
David, I just want to make a point on the oil and gases versus electricity, and it's a fine point, but it's an important one. If you cut off the oil and gas from going across the border to the United States, the U.S. is going to pivot to Venezuela and bring in oil and gas that's going to fill their refineries. If you cut off electricity, Minnesota can't pivot to anywhere else.
Right.
Electricity is electricity in the transmission lines. There's a market with oil and gas. It's far more dangerous, and you can't equate the two.
Yeah, there could be issues, though, with the FERC rules, federal electricity regulation, you know, like the principles of reciprocity and cutting off power. You could lose market access. So that is fraught with a bunch of things, too. Like nothing, there are very few good options if this turns into a trade war. But, Rob, I wonder about, like, your thoughts on who's speaking to Trump about Canada? Like, you know, a lot of people are sending messages like, why are you talking to Kevin O'Leary? I'm like, well, he's there. He talks to Donald Trump, and he brokers access for premiers to get in there. He has some insight into his thinking, and, you know, the government is kind of distracted, and the ministers just aren't available to talk to us with everything going on.
I don't blame Danielle Smith for going down there.
No.
But nobody should confuse her role. She is representing the interests of Alberta. That's what she's elected to do. That's fine. But she's not representing the interests of Canada, and Canada's interests aren't really being represented right now. In terms of energy, François Legault would not be in favor of cutting off hydroelectric sales to the northeastern United States either.
Right.
Look, we have got a president who's a shark, and people like Kevin O'Leary are throwing bloody chum into the water of Canada as Trump circles. It's not Danielle Smith's fault. She's doing her job. It's not François Legault's fault. He's doing his job as well. What is Kevin O'Leary doing? He's promoting Kevin O'Leary. But at the same time, he's talking about a change to our tax system, a change to our federal system, which allows for provinces to control their own resources. He's also calling for the end of our supply management system. Not great for consumers, but right now, is it a good thing for a country like Canada to have control over its own food supply? Maybe it's not such a bad thing. If Kevin O'Leary is going to suggest fundamental changes to our federal system, to our tax system, to our food system, maybe he should run. Oh, wait a sec, he's done that already, and he was a colossal failure.
Well, it is interesting, Lisa, to watch there's a lot of people out there who really don't like Justin Trudeau and really don't like this government. And when Elon Musk and Donald Trump and everyone started taking shots at them, they joyfully got him part of the parade. And now that it's a threat of tariff and a 51st state, it's like these dogs caught this car and they do not want it, right? And now you have this kind of a conversation happening that Donald Trump's not even in office yet. And we've got like nationally recognized people advocating for total economic capitulation in some ways, an economic union with the U.S. at their standard. What do you make of this moment that we kind of found ourselves in?
You mean the one where random Canadians get to go in and talk to the President of the United States?
Yeah, that one.
We don't
that
have the
moment.
federal government doing it. Yeah, I'm not really happy with that one either. I think that the sooner look, I'm always been on team election. I think that having an election, getting a mandate, you know what Doug Ford said today? He said, look, if we have to spend billions of dollars in Ontario in order to deal with these tariffs, then we're going to go to Ontarians and ask them if that's what they want to do. And that he's talking about getting a mandate. I think that is the equal kind of discussion point that should be happening federally, because like I said at the beginning, buckle up, Canadians, this is going to be really difficult, and lots of different numbers throwing around in terms of what the reduction in the GDP growth is going to be in this country. And it's significant. And who's going to get hurt are the people who deserve it the least, quite frankly.
Brad, I got 30 seconds, but it seems like a lot of political actors are using the threat of Trump to justify whatever action they want to take that is in their own their own political self-interest. And it feels like a broader Canadian interest is maybe, secondary to that. Just 30 seconds here.
Well, we saw for about a year, we saw provincial premier incumbents going to the polls in order to run against Justin Trudeau, who is still in office. Now we can see people justifying certain activities because of Donald Trump. Yeah, the external action. The key here is the vacuum at the federal level, and this is like nobody is speaking for Canada, and to sum it all up. And this is bad not only for the country on the world stage or on the continental stage, but it's bad for average Canadians who are being left behind because of the situation. It's really sad to watch that people are going to be hurt because of this absence of leadership at the federal level and all these provincial premiers running around looking out for their narrow provincial interest, not the country's interest.
Okay, we got to leave it there. We're going to have a lot more to talk about. 1 week from today, you're all back, and Trump will be there. We may know. The signal and noise may be separated. Rob Russo, Lisa Wright, Brad Levine, and Vandana Cutter, thank you so much for being here today.